Hello. Now, this is the second half of the series of lectures I do on intellectual freedom and censorship. We talked a little bit about ethics and issues related to computers and such. Now, what I'd like to do is talk specifically about censorship. Now, of course, as we mentioned, there's patron censorship. Censorship against books, displays. There are the cases of patrons who have read the book, patrons who have not read the book. Again, I would recommend that in the collection development policy a library has, they include information about the American Library Intellectual Freedom, referencing in links possibly to the Library Bill of Rights, the freedom to read, the freedom to view, and different documents of that nature. Generally speaking, in a policy, you would say something of the nature of the library abides by intellectual freedom, and that the library follows, Bill of Rights, Library Bill of Rights, the freedom to read and freedom to view, and those various documents. Usually, in a policy, you can provide a link to that information in addition to making a statement. I have seen good collection development policies where it is up front early on in the policy. I have seen good policies where under the section of censorship, a statement of intellectual freedom is mentioned. Regardless of where in a policy it is mentioned, it should be mentioned at some point in the policy. Policies give strength to how a library handles patron censorship. Now, in addition to patron censorship, where the patron goes to the library and says, I disagree with the book, there are people who try to prevent others from reading by removing materials from the library. In other words, a patron who has an issue with a book may actually check the book out of the library and never return it, trying to prevent others from reading it. Library generally has a policy related to removal of books in terms of theft or checking out a book and never returning it. The library should just follow the general policies related to books that are not returned, how the library handles that. Generally speaking, there is generally a fine or a bill in some fashion, and if the bill is received, then the library would turn around and purchase the same book, possibly, or a similar book, to replace the book that is missing. So a patron who removes materials to prevent others from reading probably is not preventing the library from buying another book. What they have done is they have physically removed a book that costs a certain amount of money. They're basically taking money from the collection development budget and causing essentially a theft of loss. Now, of course, there's libraries who worry about violence, especially anger. Patrons who come into the library very vocal about a book or a program or something, and they come up to a staff person with a degree of anger. This is a situation where the director, particularly, needs to come out and deal with the situation, because a staff person should not have to be concerned about any of these topics. If it is actual violence, then there should be processes in place dealing with getting police or various authoritative agents, involved. Sometimes the person is just angry and vocal. This is where a director should come out and deal with the situation, and not the staff person. However, as part of that, information should be put into the code of conduct related to issues of violence and anger and how the library would handle that. It should be fairly well provided in a code of conduct about that. Collection development policy should handle materials related to library removal, withdrawal, etc. In those regards. So it's okay to be worried, to be concerned about issues related to censorship. There's nothing that says that you can't be concerned. However, it is important not to let the concern drive selection. You can be concerned, but still not let that drive how you purchase and select materials for the library. What you got to remember is that selection is for everyone, not just library users, but you're selecting materials that could be used by everyone in the community. If it's a public library, it's everyone in the community. If it's a school library, everyone who possibly could go to the school, students and teachers. If it's a university, it would be the students and faculty. There are issues related to prisons, for example, where the prison officials may say something cannot be made available, but that is a little more specific. When we're talking about selection, we're talking about primarily public libraries and school and university libraries, to not let censorship issues or concerns affect what is bought for the library. That what is selected because it fits the goals of the library and not the goals of the minority. Well, I should rephrase that. Selection is for everyone in the community, and while you may buy things for the minority, you should not let the minority tell you what to purchase. Now, there is the other issue, the issue of librarian censors. This is actually a area that is a concern. It is actually, depending on the library type, the percentages vary, but there is a fairly substantial percentage of people who self-censor. Self-censorship is a problem. People self-censor for a couple reasons. One is they're afraid that if they buy a material, that someone is going to be critical of the material, and they're afraid of censorship. So they don't buy something because they're afraid of censorship. They're afraid that the item will be censored. And then, of course, the other one being that there's a personal disapproval of an item, and so it's not purchased. You should not fear of others censoring a book to prevent it being bought, and you have to be aware of material that could be used by others that you may personally disagree with. This is a situation that occurred that I was working as a selector of particular materials, and my supervisor knew that a librarian who was buying materials for a library, even though she was very good, she bought very good materials for the library, he also knew that she personally did not particularly care for that area of the collection. It's not that she censored herself. She was actually a very good librarian who did not. However, he also knew that she did not particularly care for that area. So what he did was he gave that area to me with her permission, because I didn't have a problem collecting in that area, and I could do a good job, and yet it freed her up from collecting an area that she actually didn't care for. Now, there is also corporate self-censorship. Electronic publications make it easy to self-censor. I've got a link here, and you can find it very easily. It's on elsevier.com about article withdrawals. They actually have a document about it. But the problem here is that it's easy for a company to withdraw an article completely from their electronic database without it being ever seen by readers. In the past, when libraries received print journals, the article would still exist, and then later, if the publisher felt there should be some comment about it, they would publish an article withdrawing it, or saying that, you know, this article is not accepted for whatever reason. Now they just simply remove the article from their database, and it's never seen. This could be an issue. For example, let's take the topic of cold fusion, which is used in chemistry. Some individuals wrote an article and studied cold fusion and wrote an article about it. However, other scientists tried to replicate the experiment and could not do it. And so while the article on cold fusion was published and printed, later other authors experimenting on the topic determined that it was not, in their view, good science. And so it was important that there's articles about cold fusion, because people have experimented, and if the Elsevier removed it, then others couldn't try to replicate the experiments. Then there's the issue, of course, of articles existing that later are determined to have a problem, and then the person studying that topic doesn't look at all the possible articles. There was a situation of a person who was not actually passed away because the researchers only did an electronic search and did not look at the older material, which is in paper. Fortunately, today, databases that had been in paper have been what they call retrocon and put into electronic materials. But at that time, there was a section that was electronic and a section that was in print. We should talk about these various topics on the appropriate discussion boards, but always remember that you can send topics to me personally through the virtual class page, or email to me if appropriate. But remember, just because there's a discussion board, you can certainly ask questions on the discussion board too. Thank you very much.